With us today is Ms. Sigrid Kaag. She is the UN Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask you first about your recent visit to Gaza. Can you tell us a little about what you saw on the ground and the purpose of your mission there?
Well, the purpose of the mission, of course, is to really meet and talk and be as informed as possible as to the challenges, the issues, and how we can make progress. It's in support also of all the humanitarian colleagues that are working day in, day out in Gaza. What I saw, of course, in the different parts of Gaza, we drove through this visit, it was my fourth one, was extensive destruction, speaking to people and hearing from them how they've been impacted, hearing of their loss, their trauma, and of course also how they even managed to cope under the very, very dire, nearly dehumanizing conditions the majority of Gazans are living under. The focus of the mission this time was on the health conditions in Gaza, and I was accompanied by the WHO team. So we visit Nasser Medical Complex, which had been on the inside totally rampaged, but the medical director was already planning how he could get the hospital one way or another up and running, at least in very modest forms. I also visited the IMC Medical Field Hospital, where a lot of the seriously injured, including seriously injured and, for instance, malnourished children were being treated. So speaking to patients, but also speaking to medical doctors, and again being very moved, but of course also very humbled by the collective responsibility we all have to alleviate suffering and to try to work as much as possible, not only to get humanitarian assistance in, for it to reach people in a consistent and sustainable basis, but of course also to look beyond the horizon of the current crisis.
Right. And Resolution 2720, which requested the establishment of your post, also requested the establishment of a mechanism to increase humanitarian aid into Gaza. Yeah. Where do we stand on that, and what are the challenges in establishing this mechanism?
Well, I think the resolution actually is most important in terms of two aspects: facilitation, acceleration, expedition of humanitarian assistance going into Gaza. The second part is establishment of a mechanism indeed to support all that, and ultimately also in support of the collective efforts by the UN, international NGOs, also Palestinian NGOs, and the broader international community. What we've done in the last months, we have established an integrated database, we've negotiated routes, the so-called Jordan route, have been working with others on the Maritime Corridor, but of course also the harnessing the importance of the Egyptian route via Rafah to ensure that we have access points, that we can increase the volume, and that we can actually track, notify, and have a better sense of what will be going to Gaza in support of the priorities set by the humanitarian country team, and then within Gaza understand that it's reaching people and it gets distributed in the optimal manner. See, a mechanism is not a sacred entity. It is a platform in a way that provides visibility, helps prioritization, and gives data, and ultimately it should smooth the process. So we take away all the unnecessary delays, we know what's happening, and it ultimately also provides for a transparency that is very much needed.
You spoke of the possibility of a maritime border, and there's a maritime corridor, and there's a lot of buzz around this today. Where do we stand on this? What's the latest?
Well, it is still very much a very active work in progress, but you may recall that in February the United Nations has committed myself alongside, on behalf of the United Nations, alongside a number of other foreign ministers of committed countries, with the government of Cyprus, to say we see value in the additionality of the maritime corridor. We're trying to see how this could be made to work. And on the UN side and the humanitarian actors inside Gaza, we have been exploring under which conditions, which parameters the UN could be part of the receipt and distribution across Gaza. This has security considerations. It has obviously serious concerns around the safety and security of distribution, but also the safety and security of the civilian population. A number of questions are being worked through. From the UN side, under the mechanism and my mission, we are hosting the Secretariat in support of the member states that want to send cargo via Cyprus. There are monitors deployed in Cyprus, and we are supporting the process, I would say, from the start and hopefully also to the end point. And this is an important route. However, I've said it many times before, it is not a substitute to the importance of assistance and in future recovery and reconstruction goods reaching the Gaza Strip. It's all about land, land and land. And this is our ultimate focus. But additionality is welcome given the complexity of the situation and the totality of needs, not only now, but also in future.
There's a heightened concern over the safety of humanitarians in Gaza, and humanitarians themselves have expressed their own concerns for their safety. What is being done to, let's say, strengthen the deconfliction mechanism and ensure that they can do their job?
Yeah, it's of course a horrendous situation where so many humanitarian workers and majority of them Palestinians have lost their lives. It's in any situation of war and conflict, it's always a big risk, and people risk their lives in the service of others. It is the most noble sacrifice, but we shouldn't be in that position. So deconfliction has been a long ask and a long-standing important topic of discussion, but of course active negotiation. Deconfliction is a very sensitive and complex process, but it needs very clear understandings, communication, the respect, of course, for the role of the humanitarian workers, and agreements on how this is operated. This affects convoys, it affects places of distribution, it affects very clear and very specific agreements that we have been negotiating with the Israeli authorities, and in particular, of course, where the IDF has a key role to play.
I know that now everybody's focus is on the immediate humanitarian crisis at hand. But even as the war rages on, we're seeing images that are beyond comprehension. Yeah. Is it even possible to reconstruct Gaza at this point?
Well, I think that's perhaps a rhetorical question only we have the luxury to ask. I think we have the duty of care, we have the responsibility, and we owe it to the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza to think, to be working closely with the Palestinian Authority. Of course, and the Secretary General has stated this on numerous occasions. We hope for their speedy return to Gaza so that the institutions can lead on this process. The Palestinian Authority has a plan for Gaza, and obviously a lot of studies have been done. If it's possible, I think it's a very tall order. If you look at the extent of the damage, even just looking at rubble removal, at the need to reconstruct housing as soon as possible, to get children back into school, at least places of learning, so we do not inflict a generation that has no access to schooling or proper education. Particularly for Palestinians, this has always been their pride and joy. They learn, you can advance yourself. It's an important aspect of whom we are as human beings. So I think it should be a rhetorical question. We have the duty and the responsibility to ensure that we start to work towards early recovery, think about the reconstruction, and also the financing. I'm acutely aware, of course, that it's intrinsically tied to progress on the political front, the two-state solution, but we cannot ask civilians to wait. You know, lives goes on and people have suffered a lot.
Speaking of people suffering, I wanted now to touch on reconstructing lives, because we, like you said, we have a duty to reconstruct Gaza, but also how can people, you know, who live through these horrors get hope and continue with their lives? The healing of the soul is intrinsically personal, and I think it's very hard to even for us on the safety of the outside world to even start to comprehend what people have been going through. Children that are suddenly without a known living relative, children that have had to suffer amputations without anesthesia, families that have lost their children, their homes, have been displaced multiple occasions within a very narrow strip. But this too needs immediate attention. Recovery is not only physical, it is also support for the healing of the soul, to somehow give trauma a space and a place. This is
a baggage that people are asked to carry for life. But here, to my mind, this is where the immense focus on psychosocial support and mental health support in crisis settings, or rather mental health and psychosocial support, MHPSS. When I was in the Dutch government, we spearheaded a lot of the international efforts around this. And I've been asking a number of the counterparts I speak to consider this aspect as important as food, shelter, water, and all the other elements of the essential parts we need. It is, you cannot be whole as a human being. This aspect needs special nurturing, special attention for many years to come. And here, whilst the Palestinians in Gaza have been ultimately very resilient, they need significant support. We need the experts, we need the psychologists, the psychiatrists, we need to train the trainers, but an entire population is traumatized. So it's very different, and it asks us, all of us, also with a lot of expertise from within the region, to think and work very differently. And we need to plan for that from now. But if you ask today, the first ask, of course, of many Palestinians I speak on my field visits, give me dignity. And of course, this is it's very complex, but we need to start very practically, but never forgetting about the soul, human beings, and human dignity. This is equal for all of us, whomever we are, wherever we are.
I have one last question about if, you know, the people that you met on the ground who were telling you this, give us dignity. Is there a particular story that maybe touched you personally more than, or not more than others, but something that you can tell us that you were really touched by, that you saw during this visit?
Well, I think, to be honest, you feel in a way so humbled and so moved by all the different stories of suffering, and it also makes you feel at a certain stage also quite helpless, because we have words and we work, but you know, you want to do things like now on the spot, but we all have different roles and responsibilities. I will tell you a different story. It is not individual stories. I met with a number of Palestinian NGOs, some of them who have been working there for decades in different sort of situations, political and military situations. And they were so committed, and I would say almost positively strident. So my takeaway was, everything we do, Palestinian civil society needs to very much be on the forefront alongside the return of the Palestinian Authority, because they know their people, they've been there, they have expertise, and they're already thinking. They already had ideas, again, to restart. Now, I think many people wouldn't have the mental strength or the physical strength. So I would say, you know, more than hats off. So let's not forget their immense courage and determination. And we need to cultivate that, we need to nurture it.